Hey guys, welcome back to Wix Fix. I hope you're having a fantastic day. In today's video, I'll be helping you decide which Wix editor is right for you. I'll be showing you the pros and the cons for both the Classic Editor and Editor X. That way you can make an educated decision for which platform is best for you. If you're not aware, Wix technically has 3 editors: the Classic Editor, Editor X, and Wix ADI. We will not be discussing the Wix ADI because that should only be used as a starting point for the Classic Editor at most. But the Classic Editor is what most people think of when they think of Wix. It is the same editor that has been around since the launch of Wix back in 2006. Since then, Wix has obviously added more features and improved the editor drastically from what it used to be. However, the Classic Editor still comes with its limitations. And with the rise of Webflow and some other web builders in the market, Wix needed a new web builder to compete with these other professional tools. That is when Wix introduced Editor X. Editor X has more features and less limitations than the Classic Editor, but it is a lot more complicated. So in today's video, we'll be breaking down both editors to see which platform is best for your website or for your upcoming projects. Now before I get started, I do want to mention that only 16% of my viewers are subscribed to the channel. If you're new around here or you've been watching my videos for a while, I want to challenge you to subscribe to the channel if you find this video useful or interesting at any point. We strive to make the best Wix tutorials possible to help you learn Wix and grow your business online. And for all of you that have already subscribed, I just want to say thank you. It really does mean a lot to me. But now let's get back to the video. Let's start with the Classic Editor. This is an amazing web builder for those who are beginners or have no professional web design experience. The Classic Editor is specifically good for those who are starting their business or those who may not have a budget to hire freelancers or agencies to design the website for them. For the most part, it is just a drag and drop builder. And as long as you keep the important elements between Wix's recommended guidelines, the site will be responsive on all desktop and tablet sizes. With that being said, you are only limited to a desktop and mobile breakpoint. If you aren't familiar with what breakpoints are in Wix, these define what your website looks like on a variety of devices. Now I know that I have mentioned this before, but about 50% of your users will come on some sort of mobile device, and a tablet is actually considered a mobile device. However, for most tablets, they view your website in the desktop form, and sometimes it doesn't work correctly or looks weird. That is probably one of the biggest flaws that I can think of for the Classic Editor. But if you're relatively new to Wix and you abide by the Wix's guidelines, then for the most part you should be fine. I've only had issues with the tablet version of the site when trying to accomplish something cooler on desktop. So overall, unless you're a web designer, then these limitations should not really affect you directly. Another con that I have for the Classic Editor is the guidelines. Yes, they are wonderful for those who aren't too familiar with Wix and web design. But if I were to add some columns to my strip, the space for the content seems so small. And it's actually too small. Then if you bring your website view in as if you were viewing it on a smaller desktop, the column height doesn't adjust and the content inside doesn't get any smaller. The Classic Editor is all pixel based, which pixels are not dynamic values. Each pixel is a certain width and a certain height. So whatever size of screen that your user is on, the content will always be the same size. I've gotten pretty used to this and have learned to design my websites around that with that in mind, but this is not a problem for Editor X. And I guess that's a nice transition to start the discussion for Editor X. Editor X has a similar feel to the Classic Editor for how it operates. At least it seems that way at first. It is still a drag and drop editor, but if you treat Editor X like the Classic Editor, then you will be sure to run into many issues down the road. Editor X was definitely made with freelancers and agencies in mind. I really don't believe that Editor X was made for the average consumer or small business owners needing to create their own website for their business. While Editor X is tempting to use because of all the cooler features, Editor X is so much more robust and takes a lot of time to learn and get used to. If you're a freelancer or agency, then I would say that investing time to learn the platform would be very beneficial for your business. But if you classify yourself as an average consumer or small business owner, then it'll take you way longer to learn how to properly use the platform. You may be asking what I mean by this. Well, as I mentioned before, the Classic Editor has guidelines to put content inside of. If you put your content in between those lines, then the content will show up on all screen sizes. But in Editor X, there are no lines. You have to manually make everything responsive. You have to use a combination of several techniques to make these websites responsive. Then you have to guess and check a lot more than you would for the Classic Editor. I'll be going into further detail in future tutorials about how to make these things responsive in Editor X, but I do want to note that it takes practice to know what you're doing. You may be wondering exactly what some of those features are for helping create responsive websites in Editor X. For starters, Editor X has scaling text feature that shows different text sizes depending on your user's screen size. Editor X also has percentages, viewport height and widths, pixels, and even min and max values. For one section on a site, I could be using a combination of each of those measurements for different elements in that section. You can also apply those dynamic measurements to the sections themselves. That way you don't run into the issues that I was showing you earlier for the classic editor. I also want to mention that Editor X actually has a tablet breakpoint, and if you wanted to, you could create up to 3 more breakpoints if needed. Now, I have not had a project where that was really necessary, but it's nice to know that we have that option. And although Editor X comes with a tablet breakpoint, that is just another breakpoint to edit. I am not complaining by any means because that was one of my main complaints for the classic editor, but the reason I bring it up is because if you're on a tight deadline, then you need to keep in mind that this could potentially be a pretty time-consuming task, especially if you have a lot of pages. The last thing that I'll mention about Editor X is the premium plan pricing. Although Editor X is technically free to use just like the classic editor, when upgrading to a premium plan, there is quite a steep price difference. Even at the lowest plans available, there is an $8 difference. And that is if you subscribe to the annual plan. If you go with the monthly plan, then there is only a $5 difference, which honestly seems a little weird. But obviously Wix set it up in a way that you save a little bit of money when you choose an annual plan. For the e-commerce plan, there seems to only be a $7 difference for the lowest plan if you subscribe annually. So if you're just getting started and maybe you don't have the extra funds for a few more features, then it may be economically smarter to just stick with the classic editor. At the end of the day, the choice is yours to make. But my professional opinion is to not use Editor X unless you're willing to invest a lot of time to learn how it works. Of course, I will be uploading a lot of Editor X tutorials on the channel soon, so make sure you're subscribed. Also, if you want to learn more about Editor X, you can check out my friend who has a whole channel based on creating stunning websites in Editor X. His channel is called I Love Editor X, and I will leave a link in the description, so go check him out. I know he would really appreciate your support, especially if you plan to use Editor X. But to get back on track, if you're a freelancer or an agency wondering which platform to use, I really believe it would be smart to learn Editor X. I would actually make sure that you are familiar with both editors, just in case you have a client that specifically wants one or the other. And if you're a small business owner, then I would highly recommend sticking with the classic editor, unless you are willing to spend a ton of time learning the platform, or unless you have a budget to hire professionals that can build it for you quickly, like me. I'm just playing, but those are the things that you need to keep in mind when choosing a Wix platform to choose for your website or any upcoming projects. That basically wraps it up for the video today. If you guys did find this useful or informative, please leave a like and consider subscribing for more Wix content coming out really soon. Thank you guys again, and I'll see you all in the next one.